Before you were born, before your first breath touched this world, your soul stood at a threshold. It looked down upon the earth, upon all the families that existed, all the possible mothers and fathers, all the homes you could enter, and in that sacred moment, with wisdom far beyond what your mind can now remember, you chose this asterisk family, not the one next door, not the wealthy one, not the peaceful one. You chose the very people who would break you open, challenge you, perhaps even wound you, because your soul knew something your human heart has forgotten. It knew that within this specific constellation of people, within these particular difficulties and these exact circumstances, lay the precise curriculum your consciousness needed to evolve. This was not random. This was not punishment. This was the most profound act of love your soul has ever made. And today, I will show you why. I want you to take a breath with me right now, a deep one, because what I'm about to share with you will change everything you thought you understood about your life. It will reframe your childhood. It will illuminate your struggles. It will reveal that even your deepest pain had a purpose woven into the fabric of eternity. You see, I have spent lifetimes studying the great mystery of karma, of reincarnation, of why souls return again and again to this earthly classroom. And I have witnessed something extraordinary. Every single person who has ever felt abandoned by their family, rejected, misunderstood, unloved, carries within them a divine secret, that feeling of not belonging. It's actually evidence that you belong, so profoundly that your soul orchestrated the entire experience before you arrived. Your family was not assigned to you by accident. You were not dropped randomly into the wrong home. You selected them with the precision of a master artist, choosing exactly the right colors for a painting that would take an entire lifetime to complete. Now I know what you might be thinking. You might be saying, why would I choose a father who was absent? Why would I choose a mother who couldn't see me? Why would I choose siblings who competed with me, or poverty, or chaos, or coldness? And this is the question that will unlock everything. Because you didn't choose these people to make you comfortable. You chose them to make you conscious. Your soul is not interested in an easy life. Let me say that again, because we have been conditioned to believe the opposite. Your soul is not interested in comfort, in convenience, in a life without friction. Your soul is interested in one thing only: growth, expansion, the shedding of illusion, the remembering of who you truly are. And sometimes the only way to remember you are light is to spend time in darkness. The only way to develop compassion is to know suffering. The only way to discover your unshakable strength is to be placed in situations that would break anyone who hadn't come specifically to learn how to be unbreakable. Think about this. If you had been born into a family where everything was perfect, where every need was met instantly, where no conflict ever arose, where would you learn patience? Where would you discover resilience? How would you develop the ability to love people who were imperfect, which is everyone? How would you cultivate forgiveness, which is one of the highest spiritual practices a human being can master? You wouldn't. You would remain spiritually dormant, comfortable but unconscious, safe but small. Your soul didn't want that for you. Your soul wanted magnificence. So it looked across all of space and time, and found the exact combination of people who would provide the specific lessons you needed. And here's what makes this so beautiful and so painful at the same time. The people who challenge us the most are often the souls who love us the most. Before you were born, you made soul contracts with each member of your family. You sat together in the space between lives and you said, I need to learn about boundaries. Will you be the one who violates mine? I need to learn self-worth. Will you be the one who criticizes me? I need to learn to trust myself. Will you be the one who gaslights me? And because they loved you, they said yes. This doesn't excuse their behavior. This doesn't mean you should stay in harmful situations. But it does mean that there is a deeper intelligence operating beneath the surface of your family dynamics, a sacred choreography that your soul set in motion long before your mind could understand it. Every difficult person in your family is actually a teacher wearing a disguise, and the lesson is always about returning you to your true self. Let me tell you something I learned when I was very young, something that shook me to my core. I discovered that the feelings we cannot stand in our family members, the traits that make us recoil, the behaviors that trigger us into rage or despair, these are almost always mirrors. They are reflecting back to us something we have rejected in ourselves, something we have buried, something we need to heal. Your critical mother may be teaching you about your own inner critic. Your distant father may be showing you where you have abandoned yourself. Your jealous sibling may be revealing your own unexpressed desires. And here's the sacred twist that makes karma so brilliantly designed. Often the people we chose as family are souls we have known before, across many lifetimes. That instant dislike you felt towards someone, that inexplicable bond with another, these are not new relationships. These are old relationships continuing. You may have been enemies in a past life, and you chose to be family in this one to learn how to transform hatred into love. You may have abandoned someone in another incarnation, and now they abandon you so you can feel what you once inflicted and choose differently. This is not punishment. This is balancing. This is the universe's profound fairness, giving everyone the opportunity to experience all sides, to understand all perspectives, to become whole. What I'm sharing with you is not meant to make you passive or accepting of abuse. Please hear me on this. There is a difference between understanding why your soul chose a situation and staying in a situation that is actively harming you. Spiritual wisdom includes boundaries. It includes saying no. It includes protecting yourself. The lesson is not to tolerate everything. The lesson is to understand everything, and then choose consciously how you want to respond. And this is where spiritual practice becomes truly mature. It's where you stop being reactive and start being responsive. There's a massive difference between these two states of being. When you're reactive, you're like a pinball being bounced around by every trigger, every slight, every disappointment. Someone says something harsh, and immediately you're on fire. Your boss criticizes your work and you spiral into self-doubt. For days, a friend forgets to call you back, and you create an entire narrative about how nobody cares. But when you're responsive, you create space. You observe what's happening, you feel the emotion rising in you, and then from a place of awareness you choose how to act. I remember a period in my life when I was working in a corporate environment, before I fully committed to teaching. There was this colleague who seemed to have made it his mission to undermine me. Every meeting he'd find a way to dismiss my ideas or take credit for my work, and for months I let it eat me alive. I'd go home angry. I'd rehearse arguments in my head. I'd fantasize about the perfect comeback that would expose him in front of everyone. I was giving him so much power over my inner state. He was living rent-free in my consciousness. Then one day, sitting in meditation, I had this moment of clarity. This person wasn't actually doing anything to me. He was behaving according to his own conditioning, his own insecurities, his own need for validation, and I was choosing every single day to take it personally. I was choosing to let his behavior define my worth. That realization didn't make his behavior acceptable. It didn't mean I had to be passive, but it shifted something fundamental. The next time he tried to undermine me in a meeting, I didn't react with anger or defensiveness. I simply calmly stated the facts. I didn't make it personal. I didn't need to win or make him look bad. I just spoke my truth clearly. And here's what's beautiful: when you stop feeding the drama with your emotional reactivity, the drama loses its power. Within a few weeks, his behavior toward me changed completely. Not because I'd defeated him, but because I'd stopped playing the game. The shift was subtle at first. He stopped making those pointed comments in meetings. The energy between us became neutral, not friendly, not hostile, just clear. And that clarity taught me something profound. Most conflicts aren't about winning or losing. They're about who can stay centered the longest. This brings me to the second strategy, and it's counterintuitive. You have to become completely uninteresting to manipulators. Think about it. Drama feeds on reaction. Manipulators are like emotional vampires. They need your energy to survive, your anger, your defensiveness, your need to explain yourself. That's their food source. But what happens when you become nutritionally void? I remember working with a woman who was constantly trying to pull me into office gossip. She'd corner me in the break room, lean in with that conspiratorial whisper, "Did you hear what Sarah did?" And for weeks I'd engage. I'd listen. I'd react. I'd add my own observations. I was feeding the beast. Then one day, I decided to become boring. She started her usual routine, and I just smiled and said, "I haven't really noticed." That's it. No judgment, no curiosity, no energy. Her face actually fell. She tried again the next day. Different bait. Same response from me. Pleasant, neutral, uninteresting. Within 2 weeks she stopped approaching me entirely. Not because she was angry, because I'd become useless to her agenda. And here's what I learned: when you stop being a participant in other people's narratives, you reclaim your power. But let me be clear about something. This isn't about being cold or disconnected. It's about selective engagement. You're not shutting down. You're choosing consciously where your energy goes. There's a massive difference between being emotionally unavailable and being emotionally intelligent. You can still be warm, kind, and present, but you do it on your terms, not as a reaction to someone else's manipulation. And here's what happens when you get this right. When you stop being available to emotional chaos and start being sovereign in your responses. People notice. The friend who used to vent for hours without asking how you're doing. They suddenly realize the dynamic has changed. They either step up and reciprocate, or they fade out. And honestly, both outcomes are wins for you. The family member who weaponized guilt, they find that their old tactics don't land anymore. You're not cold, you're just unmoved. And that simple shift changes everything. Because when you stop dancing to someone else's emotional music, they have to find a new tune, or find a new dancer. Now I want to address something important here. Some of you might be thinking, but isn't this just becoming callous? Isn't this just shutting down? No, and here's why. Being emotionally unavailable to manipulation doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care differently. You care from a place of strength, not depletion. You offer support, not servitude. You show love, not compliance. There's a beautiful paradox in this work. The less available you become to other people's chaos, the more available you become to genuine connection. Because you're no longer scattered across a dozen emotional battlefields, fighting wars that were never yours to fight. You have energy for the relationships that matter. You have space for the conversations that build instead of drain. You have capacity for intimacy that's real, not performed. I've watched people transform their entire relational landscape by making this one shift. Suddenly the relationships that survive aren't the ones based on need, obligation, or habit. They're the ones based on mutual respect, genuine care, and authentic presence. And the ones that fall away, they were never serving you anyway. They were just familiar. And we often mistake familiarity for love. Here's a practice that's been game-changing for my clients, the 24-hour rule. When someone hits you with an emotional demand, especially one wrapped in urgency, you give yourself 24 hours before responding. Not because you're playing games, but because you're creating space. Space to feel your own response, rather than react to their pressure. And in that space, something beautiful starts to happen. You begin to notice things you couldn't see before. Small details. The way their energy shifts when you don't immediately respond. How their desperation intensifies when they sense you slipping away. How they suddenly become more interested the moment you become less available. It's almost comical once you see the pattern. When you were pouring your heart out, sending paragraphs at 2 a.m., making yourself completely available, they were lukewarm at best. But now that you're taking hours to respond, now that your messages are brief and neutral, now that you're clearly not sitting around waiting for them, suddenly they're asking how you are. Suddenly they're sharing more. Suddenly they remember funny stories they want to tell you. This isn't manipulation on your part. This is simply the natural law of attraction and value. We are drawn to what moves away from us. We take for granted what remains constant and available. Your ex is no different. But here's where most people make their second big mistake. They see this shift in their ex's behavior, the increased interest, the warmer tone, the more frequent messages, and they think, it's working. Now I can go back to being my normal self. And just like that, they undo everything. They go from mysterious and intriguing back to predictable and available. They start initiating again. They respond faster. They get warmer, more open, more hopeful, and their ex senses the shift immediately and pulls back again. It's like watching someone try to approach a wild animal. Every time they get close and then lunge forward excitedly, the animal runs away. But if they would just stay calm, stay patient, stay still, the animal would eventually come to them. You have to maintain the energy even when you see it working, especially when you see it working. This is where discipline becomes everything, because your emotions will want to celebrate. Your hope will want to surge forward. That old familiar pattern of chasing will whisper in your ear, see, they do care. Now you can show them how much you care too. No, now you stay exactly where you are, calm, grounded, slightly distant, not cold, but not warm either, neutral with a hint of pleasant detachment. And you know what? That energy is magnetic, People sense it. They're drawn to it because it's so rare. Most people are either trying too hard or completely checked out. But you're present, engaged, but not needy, You're participating in life without clinging to it. I remember meeting someone like this at a coffee shop once. They were reading a book, completely absorbed. When I asked about it, they lit up, told me all about the ideas that fascinated them, asked thoughtful questions about my interests. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. It was one of those conversations that feels almost magical because both people are fully there, fully themselves. But here's the thing that stuck with me. When it was time to go, they left without trying to exchange numbers. Without that awkward "we should do this again sometime" dance. They just smiled, said it was wonderful talking, and walked away. No grasping, no trying to turn a beautiful moment into something it wasn't meant to be, and that made the memory even more precious. It remained what it was, a perfect spontaneous human connection, rather than becoming the beginning of some forced friendship that would inevitably disappoint, because we were trying to recreate that initial spark. This is what I mean about selective availability, creating space for real connection. When you're not desperately trying to make every interaction turn into something more, you can actually enjoy what is happening. You can be fully present for the moment you're in, rather than already thinking about the next time you'll see this person. Your relationships become cleaner, more honest, less transactional. You stop keeping score. You stop thinking "I texted them last, so they should text me next." You reach out when you genuinely want to connect, and you don't when you don't. It's that simple. And paradoxically, this makes people value your time more, because they know that when you reach out, it's real. It's not obligation. It's not habit. It's not because you're lonely and they happen to be available. It's because you actually want to connect with them specifically. This is respect in its purest form. And here's what's fascinating. When you practice this kind of intentional connection, something shifts in how you experience every interaction. You stop carrying that low-grade anxiety that comes from maintaining shallow relationships. You stop worrying about who you might be letting down, or who expects something from you that you can't give. I'll tell you what this looked like for me. I used to have this friend, let's call him Marcus. Great guy. We'd grab coffee maybe once every few months. Always had good conversations. But here's the thing. Every time we made plans, I felt this subtle dread. Not because I didn't like him, but because our friendship had fallen into this pattern where we were going through the motions. We'd ask the same questions, give the same updates, laugh at the same kinds of jokes. It was comfortable, but it wasn't real. One day I decided to be honest. I told him, "Look, I don't want to do the catching up dance anymore. I want to know what you're actually struggling with right now." And you know what happened? He was relieved. He'd been feeling the exact same way. That conversation went 3 hours. We talked about his marriage, his doubts about his career, things he'd never mentioned before, and our friendship transformed in that moment. That's what respect looks like when you're brave enough to practice it. It's being willing to disrupt the comfortable superficiality in favor of something real, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it risks the relationship. Because a relationship built on pretense isn't actually a relationship, it's a performance. And performances are exhausting. Now let's talk about the fourth principle. Respect means honoring both presence and absence. This one's subtle, but it's crucial. We live in a culture that glorifies constant availability. You're supposed to respond to texts immediately, be active on social media, show up to every gathering you're invited to. And if you don't, you're antisocial, you're flaky, you're not a team player. But here's the truth that nobody wants to say out loud. You cannot be genuinely present if you're always available. Think about it. Presence requires space. It requires the ability to be fully immersed in the moment you're in, not half present while anxiously monitoring your phone for the next demand on your attention. When you're always available, you're never really anywhere. You're scattered across a dozen half conversations, 100 partially fulfilled obligations, constantly toggling between contexts so rapidly that you never sink deep enough into any single one to actually be there. I learned this the hard way. There was a period where I prided myself on my responsiveness. Message me at 2 a.m., I'd reply within minutes. Need something on Sunday morning. I'm your guy. I thought this made me reliable, valuable, indispensable. What it actually made me was exhausted and ineffective. Because when that important project landed on my desk, the one that actually mattered, I had no reserves left, no deep focus, no creative energy. I'd spent it all on 1,000 tiny emergencies that weren't really emergencies at all. The people who do the most meaningful work aren't the most available people. They're the ones who've learned to construct boundaries around their time and attention. They're the ones who can say, "I'm unavailable Thursday mornings because that's when I do my deepest thinking." They're the ones who turn off notifications, who batch their communication, who understand that constant availability is actually a form of shallow living. And here's what's wild: when you become less available, you become more valued, not less. There's a scarcity principle at play. When people know they can't just grab your attention whenever they feel like it, they bring you better problems, more thoughtful questions. They do their homework first instead of using you as their first line of inquiry for every passing thought. Your availability has become weaponized against you. Every app, every platform, every service is designed to make you more accessible, more reachable, more interruptible. They call it staying connected. But you're not connected to anything meaningful. You're just tethered to 1,000 tiny leashes, each one ready to yank you out of whatever you're doing, the moment someone somewhere wants something from you. And the worst part, you've internalized this availability as a virtue. You feel guilty when you don't respond immediately. You apologize for taking an hour to reply. You check your phone during dinner, during conversations, during moments that used to be sacred, because somewhere along the line, you accepted the premise that being hard to reach is somehow rude, unprofessional, or antisocial. But let me ask you something. When did we agree to this? When did we collectively decide that everyone deserves immediate access to our attention? Our grandparents didn't live like this. They had office hours. They had evenings that were truly off. They had weekends where no one from work could find them. And somehow the world kept turning. Businesses didn't collapse. Relationships didn't disintegrate. People managed. The truth is, constant availability doesn't make you more productive or more connected. It makes you fragmented. You become a person who is everywhere and nowhere at once, present in a dozen conversations but fully engaged in none of them. You're like a radio stuck between stations, picking up noise from every direction but never locking onto a clear signal. I watch people tap through their notifications like they're diffusing bombs. The urgency is palpable, but when you actually look at what they're responding to, it's nothing. It's a comment on a post from 3 days ago. It's a work email that could easily wait until morning. It's a message from someone they barely know asking for a favor they don't want to do. This is what we've sacrificed our peace for, an endless stream of low-stakes interruptions dressed up as emergencies. And here's the psychological trap they've built. The variable reward schedule. Sometimes that notification is important. Sometimes it's exciting. Sometimes it's exactly what you wanted to see. But most of the time it's nothing. And that sometimes is enough to keep you checking, keep you hoping, keep you reaching for your phone every few minutes like a gambler pulling a slot machine lever. You're not in control anymore. You're responding to stimulus like a laboratory animal, and you don't even realize it. The tech companies know this. They've hired teams of behavioral psychologists, neuroscientists, people who understand your brain better than you do. They've designed these platforms with one goal: maximize engagement. That's the polite corporate term. The honest term: maximize addiction. Every feature is weaponized. The infinite scroll means there's no natural stopping point, no moment where your brain can say, okay, I'm done. You just keep going, one more post, one more video, one more swipe. The autoplay feature on videos means you never have to make the conscious choice to watch another one. It just happens. Your agency is removed from the equation. The red notification badges, those aren't accidents. Red is the color of urgency, of alarm. It triggers something primal in you, a sense that something requires your immediate attention. You see that little red circle, and your stress response activates. You have to check it. You have to clear it, even if it's just someone you barely know commenting, lol, on a post you forgot you made. And here's what gets me. We know all this. On some level we all know we're being manipulated. We joke about our phone addiction, about doom scrolling, about checking Instagram too much. But we don't change our behavior. Why? Because knowing you're being manipulated doesn't make the manipulation stop working. The slot machine still feels exciting, even when you know it's rigged. The cigarette still satisfies the craving, even when you've read the warning label. Your brain doesn't care about your intellectual understanding. It cares about the dopamine hit it's been trained to expect. And here's where it gets even darker. This isn't just stealing your time. It's fundamentally changing who you are. Your attention is not some abstract resource. It's the core of your consciousness. What you pay attention to literally shapes your experience of reality, shapes your thoughts, shapes your sense of self. When you fragment your attention into 1,000 tiny pieces throughout the day, constantly interrupted, constantly switching contexts, you're not just being less productive, you're losing your ability to think deeply, to reflect, to be present with your own life. And here's what most people don't realize. This isn't just affecting your work life or your productivity, it's affecting your relationships, your self-awareness, your emotional well-being, your spiritual growth, every dimension of your existence. Think about the last meaningful conversation you had. Were you fully there, Or was part of your mind checking notifications, planning your next task, replaying something from earlier? Most of us have become so habituated to divided attention that we don't even recognize when we're doing it anymore. We think we're present, but we're actually just physically there while our minds scatter in 10 different directions. I see this constantly. People who meditate for 20 minutes in the morning then spend the rest of their day in a state of complete mental fragmentation. They wonder why the peace from meditation doesn't last, why they can't access that calm during the chaos of daily life. It's because you're training two completely opposite mental states. 20 minutes of focused attention, then 14 hours of attention, destruction. Your meditation practice isn't just about those 20 minutes on the cushion. It's about cultivating a quality of attention that you carry into everything. When you're talking to your partner, are you really listening, or are you formulating your response while they're still speaking? When you're eating, are you tasting the food, or are you scrolling through your phone, your mind somewhere else entirely? This matters more than you think, because the quality of your attention determines the quality of your life. Not your circumstances, not your achievements, the quality of your attention. I've watched people in extraordinary circumstances, wealth, success, perfect relationships on paper, who are absolutely miserable because their attention is so fragmented, they can't actually experience any of it. And I've seen people in very simple circumstances, who are profoundly content because they've mastered the ability to be fully present with whatever is in front of them. This is the practice, not just on the meditation cushion, but in every moment. Can you give your full attention to washing the dishes, to walking from one room to another, to the feeling of water on your skin in the shower? These aren't trivial moments, these are your life. And if you're not present for them, you're not present for your life. But here's where it gets interesting, because when you start practicing presence in the small moments, something unexpected happens. You begin to notice that presence isn't just about appreciation, it's about perception. You start seeing things you never saw before. You walk the same street you've walked 1,000 times, but suddenly you notice the way the light falls through the trees. You have the same conversation with your partner that you've had 100 times, but suddenly you hear the vulnerability beneath their words. You do the same work you've done for years, but suddenly you see the impact, the meaning, the thread that connects it all. This is what I mean when I say presence changes everything. It literally changes what you perceive, because attention is selective. Your brain is constantly filtering reality, deciding what to show you and what to hide. And most of the time it's hiding almost everything, showing you only what it thinks is relevant to your survival and your goals. But when you practice presence, you override that filter. You tell your brain, no, show me what's actually here, not what I expect, not what I'm looking for, what's actually here. And what you discover is staggering. You discover that reality is infinitely richer than the story you've been telling yourself about it. That every moment contains multitudes. That the ordinary is extraordinary when you actually look at it. I remember the first time I really understood this. I was sitting in a waiting room, frustrated because my appointment was running late. I was lost in thought, mentally rehearsing all the things I needed to do, feeling my stress levels rising with each passing minute. And then I caught myself. I took a breath. I decided to practice presence, just as an experiment. I looked around the room, really looked. I noticed the elderly man across from me, the way his hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages of a magazine. I noticed the receptionist, the subtle tension in her shoulders as she managed phone call after phone call. I noticed the plant in the corner, somehow thriving despite the fluorescent lights. I noticed the clock on the wall, its second hand moving with patient consistency. And in that moment, I realized something profound. I hadn't been waiting at all. Waiting is a mental state, a story we tell ourselves about time. What I had actually been doing was living, just in a waiting room instead of somewhere else. I'd been too busy being frustrated about the wait to notice I was having thoughts, feelings, experiences, real ones. The wait hadn't paused my life. It was my life during that time. This sounds obvious when stated plainly, but watch how you treat your own waiting periods. The job offer that hasn't come, the relationship that's stuck, the creative project that isn't taking off yet. Notice how you mentally put yourself on hold, as if the waiting time doesn't count toward your actual existence. We do this constantly. We exile portions of our lives to some provisional category, as if we're allowed to dismiss them from the permanent record. But your consciousness doesn't have a draft mode. Every moment is the published version. There are no rehearsals. The spiritual traditions understood this deeply. They didn't create practices to help you transcend your current circumstances. They created practices to help you fully inhabit them. Meditation isn't about escaping the present moment. It's about stopping your escape from it. When you're waiting, you're typically doing one of two things. You're mentally living in the future, moment when the waiting ends, or you're resenting the present moment for not being that future. Either way, you've vacated the only moment that actually exists. The question isn't how to make waiting more bearable, it's how to stop framing portions of your life as waiting in the first place. I'm not suggesting toxic positivity. I'm not telling you to pretend you're happy when you're not, or to convince yourself everything is perfect when it clearly isn't. I'm pointing to something more fundamental than emotional tone. You're here, right now, in whatever circumstances you're in. That's not a problem to be solved. It's not an obstacle to your real life. It is your real life happening at full volume and resolution. The circumstances might be difficult. You might legitimately prefer them to be different, but labeling this time as just waiting is a form of self-abandonment. You're treating yourself as if you're not really present, as if you're somehow in suspended animation until conditions improve. But you're not in suspended animation. You're alive, fully. The same amount alive as you'll be when things change. And this realization that aliveness isn't earned through achievement, it completely changes how you walk through the world. You stop performing for an invisible audience. You stop rehearsing conversations that might happen someday. You stop living in the subjunctive mood. What I would do if, what I could be when, what might be possible once. You start living in the present tense. I remember sitting in a coffee shop years ago, working on something I thought was important. My laptop open, my expression serious, my coffee getting cold because I was too focused to drink it, and I caught my reflection in the window. This person trying so hard to look purposeful, and I realized I was staging my own life. I was directing a scene called Productive Person in Coffee Shop. I wasn't actually there. I was playing the role of someone who was there. And the question that cracked me open was this: what would it feel like to just be here? Not as research for some future chapter, not as material for later reflection, just here, just now, just this. So, I closed the laptop. I drank the coffee while it was still warm. I watched an old man feed pigeons crumbs from his muffin. I noticed a barista drawing a heart in someone's latte with more care than the moment required. I felt the worn smoothness of the table under my fingertips, and nothing happened. No revelation descended. No clarity emerged. The heavens didn't open, but I was there, fully there, and that was enough. This is what I'm trying to tell you. The waiting isn't preparation for your real life. This is your real life. This lukewarm middle, this ordinary Wednesday, this breath right now that you're taking without thinking about it. You're not in the lobby of your existence. You're in the house. And yes, the house might change. New rooms might be added. The furniture might shift. You might paint the walls or tear them down entirely. But you're already inside. You've been inside this whole time. The transformation you're waiting for, it doesn't grant you permission to start living. It reveals that you already are. And maybe that's the hardest part. Because if you're already alive, already here, already enough, then what? Then you have to actually show up. You have to be present for the boring parts, the painful parts, the parts where nothing photogenic happens. You have to live the whole life, not just the highlights. Because when you're actually living something, there's no fast forward button. There's no skip to the good part. You're just there, in real time, watching paint dry, or waiting for water to boil, or sitting in traffic thinking about all the things you could be doing instead. And this is where the real transformation happens. Not in the peak moments, not when you're standing on top of the mountain with your arms raised in victory, but in the ordinary Tuesday afternoon when you're doing laundry and suddenly you realize you're not anxious about the future. You're just folding a shirt, and somehow that's enough. The highlights are actually the least interesting part of any journey. They're the punctuation marks, not the sentences. The real story is in all the words between the commas. The early mornings when you didn't feel like getting up but you did anyway. The conversations that went nowhere but had to happen. The mistakes that taught you nothing except that you're still capable of making mistakes. I think about the people who say they want to find themselves, as if the self is a set of car keys you misplace somewhere between the couch cushions. You don't find yourself. You build yourself. Slowly, painfully, through 1,000 small decisions that nobody sees and nobody applauds. You build yourself in the moment when you choose honesty over comfort. When you say the true thing instead of the easy thing. When you sit with your own loneliness instead of numbing it with whatever's available. When you show up for someone even though you're barely showing up for yourself. The algorithm will never show you this part, because this part isn't entertaining. It's just real. And reality, as it turns out, makes for terrible content. Reality is slow. Reality is repetitive. Reality doesn't have a soundtrack or a filter or a clever caption that makes it all make sense. But reality is also the only place where anything actually happens, where you actually grow, where you actually become more than you were. And maybe that's the final lesson here, that we've been sold this idea that life is supposed to look like something, supposed to feel like something, supposed to be documented and shared and validated by strangers. But what if the best parts of your life are the parts that would bore everyone else to tears? What if the real magic happens in the moments that would make terrible content? The Tuesday morning when you burn your toast and eat it anyway, standing by the window, watching a bird build a nest in your neighbor's tree, the quiet satisfaction of organizing your bookshelf for no reason other than it felt like the right thing to do that afternoon. The 20 minutes you spent trying to get the perfect angle of sunlight through your coffee cup, just for yourself, just because it looked beautiful. These moments don't translate. They don't perform well. The algorithm would scroll right past them. And maybe that's exactly what makes them sacred. I think about the person who finds joy in collecting bottle caps. Not vintage ones, not rare ones, just regular bottle caps from sodas they've enjoyed. Someone else looks at that collection and sees trash. They see it as worthless, pointless, embarrassing even. But the collector, they see a timeline of small pleasures. The root beer from the road trip to visit their sister, the ginger ale that settled their stomach during a difficult week, the cream soda from the corner store they walked to every day after school as a kid, and now, 30 years later, still makes them feel safe. That's not weird. That's not cringe. That's being fully authentically human in a way that doesn't need an audience to validate it. We've started treating our own lives like they're public performances that we're somehow failing at. Like there's a panel of judges somewhere scoring our choices, our hobbies, our quiet Saturday afternoons. And the cruelest part, we've internalized those judges. We've become our own harshest critics, preemptively mocking ourselves before anyone else can. We call our own interests cringe before giving them a chance to bring us joy. You know what's actually cringe? Living your entire life according to what you think won't embarrass you. Curating your existence based on what plays well to an imaginary audience. That's the real tragedy. Because here's what I've learned, the things that make you weird are usually the things that make you you. And those parts, they're not liabilities to be hidden. They're your competitive advantage in a world drowning in sameness. I think about the writers I love most. They're not the ones with the cleanest prose or the most polished sentences. They're the ones who write like they talk, who let their quirks bleed onto the page. The ones who use weird metaphors that only make sense if you've lived in their brain for a while. The ones brave enough to be interesting instead of just correct. Your voice isn't something you find in a workshop or a course. It's something you uncover by removing all the layers of imitation you've piled on top of it. It's what's left when you stop trying to sound like the person you think you should be and start sounding like the person you actually are. And yeah, that means some people won't like it. Your voice will be too casual for some, too formal for others, too earnest, too cynical, too something. But that's not a bug. It's the whole point. Your voice is supposed to repel as many people as it attracts. That's how you know it's real. The alternative is creating content that nobody hates because nobody feels anything about it at all. The algorithm might smile on you for a moment, but you'll be forgotten the second the next trend rolls through. Because people don't remember content. They remember people. And you can't be remembered if you never really showed up. So here's my advice, for whatever it's worth, stop optimizing. Stop asking what people want to hear. Start asking what you need to say. Start writing like someone who has something to lose by staying silent. Start creating like this might be the last thing you ever make. Because here's what I've learned after years of watching people create and disappear, succeed and fade. The ones who last aren't necessarily the most talented. They're the ones who figured out they had something worth protecting. Not their ego, not their image, something deeper. They protected their voice when everyone told them to sound like someone else. They protected their perspective when the algorithm rewarded conformity. They protected their truth when lying would have been easier, more profitable, more popular. And you know what's wild? The audience can feel it. They might not consciously recognize it. They might not leave comments saying I appreciate your authenticity. But somewhere in their nervous system, they register the difference between someone performing and someone revealing. Between content created for clicks and content created because staying silent would be unbearable. I've seen creators with modest followings build communities that would walk through fire for them. And I've seen massive channels collapse overnight because they were built on sand, on trends, on whoever the creator thought they should be, rather than who they actually were. The difference isn't production value. It isn't posting frequency. It isn't even consistency. though that helps. The difference is whether there's a real human being behind the camera, who's decided their voice matters more than their vanity, who's willing to be wrong publicly, who's more interested in connection than perfection. This is why I keep coming back to this question of what you'd create if you knew you were dying, because death has this clarifying effect. It burns away all the bullshit, all the posturing, all the careful brand management and strategic positioning. When you're facing the end, you don't care about your SEO, you don't care about your engagement metrics. You care about legacy, about truth, about saying the thing that needs to be said before you lose the chance forever. And the beautiful, terrifying thing is, you don't need to be literally dying to create from that place. You can choose it, right now. Today, you can sit down and ask yourself, if this were my last video, my last essay, my last song, what would I want it to say? Not what would perform best, not what would make me look good, but what truth am I carrying that deserves to be spoken? That's the work. That's the real work underneath all the technique and strategy and growth hacking. Finding what you'd fight for, finding what you'd risk rejection to say, finding the message that matters more than being liked. Because here's what the algorithm really wants. Not your desperation, not your performance, not your carefully crafted image of success. It wants truth, raw, uncomfortable, human truth. The algorithm is just a mirror. It reflects engagement, and engagement happens when people feel something real. When they recognize themselves in your struggle, when they see their own hidden thoughts spoken out loud. I spent months creating what I thought were high-quality videos, perfect lighting, polished editing, professional thumbnails, scripts refined until every word gleamed. They flopped. Then one day, frustrated and exhausted, I turned on my phone camera and just talked about how lonely this journey actually feels, about the doubt that wakes me up at 3 a.m., about wanting to quit every single week. No script. No special lighting, just me, tired and honest. That video got more views in 48 hours than my previous 10 videos combined. And the comments weren't just great video. They were confessions, stories, people saying I thought I was the only one. The algorithm didn't reward my polish. It rewarded my humanity, because that's what spreads. Not perfection, connection. Think about the videos you've shared with friends, the ones you've watched multiple times. They're not usually the most professionally produced ones. They're the ones that made you feel something, that articulated what you couldn't, that broke through the noise with something genuine. The paradox is this: the more you chase virality, the less viral you become. The more you try to give people what you think they want, the less they actually want it. But when you stop performing and start sharing, when you make content that matters to you first, that serves your own understanding, that explores what you're genuinely curious about, that's when people lean in. Not everyone. You'll never reach everyone, but you'll reach your people. The ones who needed exactly that message, in exactly that moment, delivered in exactly your voice. And those people, they don't just watch. They return. They comment. They share. They become part of something bigger than a view count. They become a community. And communities, real communities, they change you. They make you better. I've watched people come into comment sections broken, struggling, alone. They leave a comment about their own pain, their own struggle, and within hours, sometimes minutes, other people respond. Strangers from around the world offering support, sharing their own stories, giving advice not because they have to, but because they genuinely care. I've seen people find business partners in YouTube comments. I've seen friendships form that lasted years, all because two people connected over a video about failure or heartbreak, or finding purpose. I've seen marriages come out of communities built around authentic content. That's not an algorithm win. That's a human win. When you create content that matters, you're not just building an audience. You're creating a space where people can be themselves, where they don't have to pretend everything is perfect, where vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength, where failure isn't the end, it's just part of the story. And here's what happens when you do this consistently, when you keep showing up with truth instead of tricks. People defend you, they promote you, they care about your success, almost as much as you do. When someone leaves a hateful comment, your community responds before you even see it. When you go through a rough patch and your content suffers, they stick around, they understand, they wait. You can't buy that. You can't hack that. You can only earn it. One honest video at a time. I think about the creators I've respected over the years, the ones whose channels I return to again and again. None of them are perfect. They're not the most polished, not the best editors, not always the most consistent uploaders, but they're real. Every video feels like a conversation with someone who actually gives a damn about what they're saying. That's the standard, not perfection, not viral tricks, not algorithmic manipulation, just genuine human connection through a screen. And when you commit to that standard, something shifts in how you approach everything. You stop asking, will this get views? And start asking, does this matter? You stop chasing trends and start setting them. You stop performing and start sharing. Because here's what I've learned. The audience can feel the difference. They might not be able to articulate it, but they know when they're being sold to versus when they're being spoken to. They know when content is manufactured versus when it's meaningful. And in a world drowning in noise, the signal matters more than ever. This shift from transactional to transformational, it changes everything about how you create. Your research becomes deeper. Your writing becomes sharper. Your delivery becomes more authentic. You're no longer trying to fill time. You're trying to create value. You're not building a content factory. You're building a body of work. And yes, it's harder. It takes more time, more thought, more courage. It's easier to chase the algorithm than to chase excellence. It's easier to copy what works than to create what matters. But easy doesn't build legacy. Easy doesn't create impact. Easy gets lost in the feed. I think about the creators I respect most. The ones whose work has genuinely changed how I see the world. None of them got there by playing it safe. None of them built their reputation on quick wins and viral moments. They built it brick by brick, video by video, committed to a standard that most people aren't willing to maintain. And that's the paradox. The thing that feels like it will slow you down, this commitment to depth, to quality, to saying something real, is actually what accelerates your growth. Not overnight, maybe. Not in ways the algorithm immediately rewards, but in ways that compound, in ways that last. Because when you create something truly valuable, people don't just watch it, they save it, they share it, they come back to it, they recommend it to friends 6 months later. That video becomes an asset, not just content. It keeps working for you long after you hit publish. Compare that to the viral moment that spikes your views for a week and then disappears. Sure, it feels good in the moment, but what did it build? What did it leave behind? A week later, you're back to zero, chasing the next hit. Real growth is quieter. It's the decision you make in the dark, when no one's watching. It's choosing the hard conversation over silence. It's showing up when you don't feel like it. It's building something that won't pay off for years. I remember sitting in my apartment after quitting a job that looked perfect on paper. Everyone thought I was insane. My parents were confused. My friends questioned my judgment. But I knew that staying would have been slow poison, not dramatic, not visible, just a daily erosion of who I actually was. There was no applause for that decision, no viral moment, just me sitting in uncertainty, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. That's where real transformation lives. In the quiet terror of doing what you know is right, even when every external metric says you're wrong. We've lost touch with this kind of growth, because it doesn't photograph well. You can't screenshot internal clarity. You can't post about the morning you finally stopped lying to yourself. You can't make a before and after of boundaries you set with people you love. The algorithm doesn't reward patience. It rewards shock, drama, escalation. So we've learned to perform growth instead of actually doing it. We announce our intentions instead of executing them. We share our plans instead of living them. We curate the aesthetic of change while staying fundamentally the same. And here's what's insidious about this. The performance actually prevents the real thing. Because every time you post about your goals, you get a small dopamine hit. Your brain registers it as progress. You've announced you're writing a book, so you feel like a writer. You've declared you're getting healthy, so you feel accomplished. The announcement becomes a substitute for the action. I've watched people spend more time documenting their journey than actually taking it. More energy on the caption than the work. More focus on how it looks than what it builds. And they wonder why nothing sticks. Why they're always starting over. Why every Monday is a fresh declaration of intentions that die by Wednesday. Because transformation isn't a post. It's not a thread. It's not a moment. It's 1,000 unsexy decisions made when you're tired, doubting yourself and no one's looking. It's choosing the real thing over the performance of the thing. Again and again and again. The people who actually change, they disappear for a while. They go quiet. They stop announcing and start doing. And when they resurface, something is fundamentally different. Not performed. Not curated. Actually different. And that difference, that actual lived difference, changes how you move through the world. Because when you've spent time in silence, real silence, The noise outside doesn't grab you the same way. Someone's angry in traffic, and instead of reacting, you just notice. The anger is there, it's real, but it doesn't hook into you. There's space between what's happening and how you respond. That space, that's the whole game. Most people think consciousness work is about adding something, adding peace, adding wisdom, adding enlightenment, whatever that means, but it's actually about creating space. Space between stimulus and response. Space between thought and identification. Space between who you think you are and what's actually true. And you can't fake that space. You can't think your way into it. You can't read about it and suddenly have it. It comes from practice. From doing the work when nobody's watching. From sitting with yourself when it's boring, when it's uncomfortable, when every part of you wants to scroll through your phone instead. I remember this moment about 2 years into daily meditation. Nothing dramatic. I was in a conversation, someone said something that normally would have triggered me, something critical, something that hit an old wound, and I felt it coming. The defensiveness, the need to explain myself, the whole familiar pattern. But this time, there was a gap, just a split second, and in that gap, I saw it, the pattern, the mechanism, the whole thing, and in seeing it, it just dissolved. I didn't fight it, I didn't override it with positive thinking, it just wasn't necessary anymore. That's what this work does. It shows you the mechanics of your own suffering, not as a concept, but as lived reality. And once you see it, really see it, it loses power. This isn't permanent. I'm not saying you reach some state where you're never triggered again. The patterns come back. The conditioning reasserts itself. But each time, there's a little more space, a little more awareness, a little less grip, and over time, those moments accumulate. They change you. Not all at once, not in some lightning bolt awakening, though those can happen too, but in a slow, quiet way that makes you unrecognizable to who you were before. Your friends notice it, even if they can't name it. You're different, they say. More grounded, less reactive, more present, and you are, because you've done something most people never do. You've actually changed. You've stepped through a door that most people don't even know exists. And now you're standing in a different room, looking back at who you used to be with compassion, maybe even a little amusement. That person who used to spiral for days over a simple text message. That person who thought their worth was tied to someone else's approval. That person who believed love meant losing yourself. They did their best. They really did. But you're not them anymore. And here's what nobody tells you about this transformation. It's not just about relationships. It never was. When you heal your attachment wounds, when you learn to regulate your nervous system, when you stop abandoning yourself for others, everything changes. Your friendships become more authentic. Your work becomes more fulfilling. Your relationship with your body, your health, your creativity, it all shifts, because you're no longer operating from that wounded place. You're no longer making decisions from fear. You're making them from wholeness. And wholeness doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean you never feel insecure, or never have a moment of doubt. It means you have a foundation now, a ground beneath your feet. It means when the storm comes, and it will come, because life is life, you don't get swept away. You bend, you feel, you process, and then you return to center, because you've built something inside yourself that can't be taken away. Not by a breakup, not by rejection, not by someone else's inability to meet you. You've built a relationship with yourself that's stronger than any external validation could ever be. And that's the real love story, not the one where someone else completes you, not the one where you finally find the one and all your problems dissolve, the one where you become whole enough to truly choose, where you love from abundance instead of desperation, where you can stand in front of another human being and say, I want you in my life, but I don't need you to feel okay. That's freedom. That's what secure attachment actually gives you. Not a guarantee that you'll never get hurt, but the certainty that you can handle whatever comes, that you'll be okay. No matter what, because you've got you. And maybe that's the most radical act of self-love there is. Not the bubble baths, not the affirmations, not the carefully curated self-care Sunday routines, but the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are enough, right now, in this moment, exactly as you are. Not because you've achieved everything, not because you've figured it all out, not because you've become some perfect polished version of yourself, but because you're here, you're trying. You're still showing up, even on the days when showing up feels like climbing Everest in flip-flops. I think about all the times I waited for permission to take up space, permission to speak my truth, permission to want what I wanted, dream what I dreamed, become who I was becoming. and the permission never came. Because I was waiting for someone else to hand me something I already had. You don't need anyone's permission to be yourself. You don't need validation to pursue your dreams. You don't need approval to take up space in this world. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to become someone completely different from who you were yesterday, last year, a decade ago. You're allowed to outgrow people, places, versions of yourself that no longer fit. You're allowed to want more, to dream bigger, to reach higher. You're allowed to rest, to pause, to move slowly through a world that demands you sprint. You're allowed to be messy and complicated and contradictory, to be both strong and vulnerable, confident and scared, together and falling apart. Because being human isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about showing up for your own life, with all its beautiful chaos and uncertain endings. And maybe, just maybe that's enough. You showing up, you trying, you being brave enough to keep going, even when you don't know where the path leads. That's always been enough. It always will be.